Okay, so this is the first video lecture on the chapter of neurobiology, and in this chapter I'm going to cover like the basic brain structures. We're going to talk about neurotransmitters and hormones, and just a very broad scope. But I wanted to start with this really cool picture. This is a picture. Obviously, it's a picture of the brain, of the skull, and you can see how this is the white matter, and the white matter is white because it has more fat or more myelin sheath, which I believe you'll learn about in this chapter. And then this is the gray matter, and this all represents the folds. What's kind of interesting about the way the brain is structured is each of these folds actually has a name, and everybody's brain should have the same folds. So it's not random that you might believe, but actually the brain is folded up in the same way for everybody, or supposed to be. And when there's like a Latin, and the folds enables there to be more surface area. And so more surface area means there can be more neural connections. A birth defect that can occur. I think one of the consequences is an alcohol poisoning or fetal alcohol syndrome. There are fewer folds, and so the brain is more flat. And when the brain is more flat, it means there's less surface area. It means there's less room for information and cognitive processing. But anyway, this is really cool. You can also see right down here, this is the corpus callosum, which we'll talk about in a slide. And the corpus callosum is the neurons that connect both the right hemisphere and the next hemisphere. This next slide I stuck in here a couple years ago because I was about this chapter when I learned about what a concussion was. And I learned about concussions because, interestingly enough, my daughter was a cheerleader and she had a concussion. And so like, what the heck is a concussion about? And concussions are very bad. You should take them very seriously. They are, in fact, brain bruises. So the brain has, as you saw with this picture, there's a space right between the skull and the skin, and that's, or right here between the brain and the skull, and that's filled with fluid. This is forget the name of it, but it's the same fluid that you find in your spine, and that acts as a cushion. But sometimes if you hit something really hard and you have something soft inside, say a fluid space, and you hit it really hard, that can whack up against the side. And because the brain is soft and mushy, if you ever have a chance to hold one, you should. But when it whacks up against the skull, which is hard, it can cause it to bruise, and that's what a concussion is. And it's very serious. Some of the symptoms, if any of you are athletes, probably know, because you probably had concussion tests. Things like, what are some of the symptoms? You've got dizziness, nausea, memory loss, sensitivity to light. And basically the only way for a concussion to heal is sleep, is rest. Not to read, not to be on your screen, not to be in light, but sleep is the only way for your brain to heal. And in one of my worst parental moments, my daughter had a concussion, and she had this big event. She had the big rally that she had to do a tumbling in. And so we pretended we didn't know she had a concussion, and you want to know what happened? It actually made it worse. So don't do that. Take concussions very, very seriously. They are serious. And then if you follow like what happens with the football players, there's actually, it's a concept. Oh my gosh. It's a kind of traumatic brain injury, but it has to do with, and this is being identified in soldiers too, is that brain, sound waves that might come from a bomb, actually cause this ricochet inside the brain too. So you can, there is evidence of traumatic brain injury caused by not the brain smacking up against the brain smacking up against the skull, but in fact loud sounds can cause such vibrations that it also causes brain damage. So the brain is resilient and it's protected inside a bone case, but it can also be damaged by outside forces. And that's all. Just wanted to tell you what a concussion was. All right, so the chapter is the basic nervous system is the structure. What the most fundamental structure is a neuron, and I'll have a couple slides about the neuron, otherwise known as a brain cell. The central nervous system is considered two parts of the central nervous system. That's the brain and the spinal cord. Obviously, the brain is in the skull, and the spinal cord is what connects it and sends out all those other messages to everything else. When I was in high school, I had opportunity to dissect a cat, and if we took the brain and spinal cord out in one piece, we got extra credit. It was quite hard. Both of these structures, nature has created structures to protect them. That's what the spinal cord is. And then we'll talk about the peripheral nervous system, and this is the nervous system that extends out from the brain and spinal cord. Some of those systems are voluntary, so you're able to think about your movements. Some of them are autonomic or automatic. And this includes what our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system. The way I think about those, to keep them straight, is the sympathetic nervous system is the part of our hormonal and our nervous system that responds when it feels sorry for you, when it's sympathetic towards you, when it wants to protect you. Para refers to like sympathetic, so a parasympathetic system is sort of the one that works counter to that. So this is the nervous system that calms down, and these two systems work together. So your sympathetic nervous system is sometimes thought of as your fight or flight, and your parasympathetic is your rest and digest system. And they work together. One acts very quickly, one slows things down. And your rest, digest, and healing. And then your endocrine system, this is actually a quiz question. What is your endocrine system? Actually the quiz question is, does an endocrinologist do? And while the answer is studies the endocrine system, that is not going to get you the points. What I want you to know is that the endocrine system is your hormone system. So this is also considered as a part of your automatic or your autonomic system, because your hormones are regulated sort of beyond your ability to think about that. Okay, and we'll talk more about those in a couple other slides, but that's the basic structure of this first part of this chapter. The brain structures, so you may have heard of the brain described as a forebrain, hindbrain, and midbrain. And while that does capture sort of the layout, if you will, it really refers more to the developmental or this neural tube. I prefer to think about the brain, and I think it makes more sense, and it probably will stick with you. It's simpler to remember if you think of the brain as sort of what we call it animal brain, and the different structures. So in the very back, where we have our cerebellum, where we have the sort of that bell structure, that sometimes is thought of as your lizard brain. So those are the very basic structures. It regulates very basic structures like your breathing and your swallowing, and your balance is also influenced by your cerebellum. And then you move towards the kind of the guts of your brain, and this is where we have things like your fear, your memory, your fear, your memory, your hunger response. And this is what you might think of as your mammalian brain, or the metaphor I like to use is your kitten brain, is your cat brain. And then at the very, very front of the very, very front, or the part of all the folds around, this is what we might think of as your human brain. This is the most sophisticated part. This is the part that allows us to think, to plan, or sometimes they call that your executive. It does the executive functions. Okay, I'm going to stop this first video here because I don't want this one to run too long, but in the next one I'm going to pick this back up and speak more in depth about it.